ready.
Hi there, folks. I'm Mark Coleman, and this is the Gridiron Report, a look at the week's top stories in Fredericksburg Regional High School football. This is our season finale, the state championship edition of the Gridiron Report. We'll recap the state championship games from the past week, take a look at some of the big moments and players from this past football season. And I have two of the very best from the Freelance Star to join me about that. We have sports reporter Nathan Waters. Nathan, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Sure. And we also have Taft Coghill. Taft, great to see you.
Great to see you, Mark.
Thanks. Nathan also covers Virginia Tech Hokie athletics for the Freelance Star. You can follow Nathan. He is at Nathan Waters on Twitter. Meanwhile, Taft covers the Virginia Cavaliers. You can follow Taft on Twitter. He is at T. Coghill Jr. They also are both part of the wonderful crew of FLS Varsity. You can log on to flsvarsity.com. Follow them on Twitter at FLS Varsity to keep up with all of the latest in Fredericksburg area high school sports. Well, fellas, the state championship season state championship has come to a conclusion. Games this past weekend. Weather certainly played a factor all around, but let's jump to the meat of it, at least in terms of area concern. James Monroe High School made the trek down to Liberty University, took on north side of Roanoke. JM's third consecutive appearance. Wow, third consecutive appearance in the state championship game. Unfortunately, it's also their third consecutive loss. Taft, you were at this game covering it for Freelance Star. Sounds like Northside had a couple of really big, really good kids on the defensive line, and that was the difference makers in this game.
Yeah, they had a couple of Division I recruits in DeAnthony Muse and Chance Hall, and both of those guys kind of wreaked havoc on JM's plans. I mean, they were able to put pressure on Jay Scroggins with just 4 men up front, and that allowed them to use 7 defenders and kind of thwart JM's passing attack.
The Yellow Jackets hung tight, though. I mean, this was not a blowout. They certainly were able to make a game of it, and there's got to be some solace, at least, in that.
Yeah, they hung tough, and for a while it appeared it would be a typical JM game where they just hang around long enough for you and kind of wait for you to make that mistake. But Northside, they never made that mistake. They had a quarterback that was very sound, and Dominique Donaville, and he was able to run and make the throws necessary to get the job done.
Well, congratulations to JM. I know Coach Survey probably a little bit disappointed, but maybe another few days, maybe a few weeks to let the sting wear off. But he certainly did an outstanding job, and that team really, I think most people felt like they overachieved. But to make a state championship game 3 years in a row, that can't be too much of a surprise to anyone.
No, not at all. I mean, this is one of their best years. I mean, you look at how they were in the regular season. They were overlooked most of the season, and they had a couple of wins there that were really close. They might not even make the playoffs. They kind of gritted through the regular season. They get to the playoffs, and then they win 4 straight over some really good competition. I mean, you beat Heritage, you beat Lafayette. That Kettle Run game was probably the hardest of that group because they had beaten them 2 straight years in the playoffs. Kettle Run really wanted to get at them, and they beat them too. And so the run they made was very impressive, and those kids they should be really proud of the effort and what they did this year.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations to Coach Survey and James Monroe on a wonderful season, and they've got a lot of youth on that team. I mean, they'll be losing some key players, but a lot of them are going to be coming back as well. Look for them next year.
Yes, look for them next year for sure. Talking to Coach Survey after the game, he felt that if he could get a running back that could carry the ball maybe 15 to 20 times a game, take some pressure off of Scroggins, that if he finds that in the offseason, they'll be right back there next year.
Pretty impressive group of receivers too, right?
Yeah, and they lose. I think they lose all those guys, don't they, Taft? I don't know. I know Bevels is gone. I know that I think Edwards and Boyd were both seniors as well. When you have Jay Scroggins coming back, you have Antonio Wynn Coleman coming back. I mean, they're going to have 2 of the best players in the area coming back on offense and defense. So they'll have 2 really good players to build around. They need to find a running back. They only rushed the ball 4 times against Northside. Survey said it last week. We're going to try to keep it away from those defensive tackles. Well, the defensive tackles brought the game to them.
Right.
They came into the backfield and wreaked havoc back there. So, yeah, getting the run game back, getting that stud tailback that they've normally had from year to year will be their priority. And they have the talent to make another run.
Once again, congratulations to the Yellow Jackets on an excellent season. Let's take a look at the other scores from around the state. In the 6A, Centerville with a big 35-6 victory over Oscar Smith. I don't think anyone saw this kind of defeat for Oscar Smith coming. That's a pretty big surprise, at least in the score there.
Yes, that's a pretty major surprise. I mean, no one foresaw that. I mean, Oscar Smith coming in with a big stud defensive tackle, Andrew Brown. Nobody could really move the ball on him all year. Colonial Ford saw that in the semifinals, and to have Centerville be able to handle him and to be able to handle that defense speaks volumes about the type of team they must have had.
Yeah, I want to know who Centerville has, because I got to see Oscar Smith 2 weeks ago at Forge, and they had the most talent that I've seen any team have in some time. I mean, they had 5 or 6 guys, major D1 talent, and for them to fall behind like they did against Centerville and lose the way they did, they must have some really great players on their team.
We'll talk about a team that's got some great players. LC Bird just keeps getting it done. 35-28 in the 5A over Briarwoods. That's a good Briarwoods team, but LC Bird, how many consecutive championships is that for them now? Do you know? Is it 3?
No, that's 2 state championships in a row. They won the 6A last year, and then they moved down to 5A and got it done again. They had a lot of talented players led by their running back Earl Hughes and quarterback Terrence Irvin.
Big win for LC Bird. In the 4A, Dinwiddie just blowing out Sharando 56-14. Dinwiddie was blowing out teams left and right, though, so not a huge surprise there, although Sharando certainly a good team.
I think anytime you see 56-14 in a state championship game, though, that's it's either impressive or you really don't know how that happened, really.
Right.
56-14.
Yeah, no kidding. Close game in the 2A, Giles with a 20-19 victory over Brunswick in overtime. And then finally in the 1A, Alta Vista shutting out Essex 21-0. That's another fact or result that sometimes raises your eyebrows. You don't typically see a shutout in a state championship game.
Yeah, and Alta Vista, they've really been on a run here with Mike Sharness as their head coach. He's a former Virginia Tech football player, and he coached Russburg for a while, and he's been at Alta Vista for about, I think, 5 or 6 years, and they've won 2 state titles under him. And for them to do what they did against Essex, and Essex has got a quality program, we know that from around here, to shut them out, that was an impressive feat.
Sure. Well, that's the look at the state championship results from this past season. Okay, well, let's take a look at some of the accolades from this past football season, starting with the Player of the Year. And let me give you some insight, folks. As we record this, we do not yet know who the Freelance Star is going to be naming as their Freelance Star Player of the Year, but there's some wonderful debate going on, basically between 3 players. There is Von Purvis, Joey Sly, and Daniel Izagu. So, I don't know, guys, you want to give your cases, Nathan?
Well, first off, I want to give a little insight on how we've done this. We've actually done it kind of Heisman ballot style this year. We've taken everybody who's covered games at the paper, and hopefully they've seen all of these guys in person, had them do a top 3, rank your top 3 players, and then we all submitted them to our stats guy, and he's tallied the votes. And right now we have a tie for first, and the third place guy is 1 point behind those 2. So I think we're going to go and do a kind of a revote situation and try to see if we can and hash that out. And if not, we might have a tie for Player of the Year. I'm not sure how we're going to do it, but we've got Izagu, who I've seen, I think, more than anybody on our staff, and he's my vote for Player of the Year. I don't mind saying that, and I think his impact on offense and defense is unquestioned. I think he's just so good at the tailback position, the receiver position. He plays defensive back for them. I think he scored 8 touchdowns rushing, 8 touchdowns receiving. He scored on a fumble return. He scored on a long kickoff return. and he played himself into major scholarship offers. I mean, he's already up to, I think he's up to 5 or 6 offers now. He's got Maryland and UVA on his list now already, and he's just had a really impressive season. So he's my vote, and I'd say it's a very close second and third between Von Purvis and Joey Sly at North Stafford, but and I think Taft can give you a much better assessment of Sly and his vote.
Joey Sly.
Yeah, I made a late pitch for Joey Sly last week, and it just kind of occurred to me just watching him 3 different times this year that he has every skill that's required of a football player. I mean, he can run, he can block, he can catch, he can tackle, he can kick, he can punt. I mean, he blocks kicks. I mean, everything that you could possibly request of a football player. I even saw him throw 2 excellent pinpoint passes on botched plays, special teams plays last week, one in which, unfortunately for North Stafford, the 2-point conversion pass was dropped, and another play in which the punt is bobbled, but he miraculously makes a throw that netted a loss of 3 yards, but it was much better than the other result, which would have been Briarwood's taking over at around the 5-yard line. So, just, like I said earlier, just every skill that you could possibly ask of a football player, Joey Sly has it.
So, guys, let me ask you this. Let me point out the obvious. We have a vote for Izagu. We have a vote for Sly, which means that you've got a running back who ran for over 2,000 yards and scored 30 touchdowns, I think it was.
Close
That's
to it or more.
not getting your vote? That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, he is getting my vote. That's the thing. Is like if I could vote for all 3 of them, I would, and that's what's so tough. I don't ever remember. I've been in this business for 12 years. At any of the papers I've been at, I never remembered this kind of race for Player of the Year. I mean, there's been 2 players. You know, last year was a runaway. I mean, I think we all agreed that Anthony Chicago was our Player of the Year, but this year we've all. And then that's we're not even mentioning Jay Scroggins at JM, who had a great season, and Sobchak, Steven Sobchak at Massaponax. I mean, the guy was an anchor on both sides of the line. He also played himself into a major D1 scholarship this year. You know, it's just been really hard. So just to put it out there for Purvis, 2,000 yards, 30 touchdowns. You can't. And he took the team on his back against Briarwoods in that game. Took the team on his back the next week. I can't remember who they played. I think it might have been Mountain View.
Yes,
I think so.
He carried the ball 40 times in that game. And then the playoff game against Massaponax, he had close to. Was he over 200 for that game?
199.
199. I mean,
over 200 total.
How can you go against? How can you go against a guy like that as well? It's very hard right now. And I think we're all going to have to kind of go back to square one and debate about it and figure out who's going to be our Player of the Year.
High intrigue here on the Gridiron Report, but I think it's an indication of the level of play that we're seeing in the Fredericksburg area. I mean, it really is something to be proud of and impressed by. Some great teams, some great performances, but also some really super individual performances. I mean, the fact is we're talking about 2 players from the same team potentially in the running. Not potentially, are in the running to be named as Player of the Year. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, you've hit it on
and
the head.
Massaponax was a wonderful team. They had some really good talent there too. And Sobchak
Massaponax is almost punished by the fact that they have so much talent, and they were just overflowing with it, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So it's a hard time of year where you gotta because these kids are hanging on these awards and these honors, and we don't want to make the bad decision, but I don't think there is a bad decision, and I think there's going to be a couple guys who deserve to win this award that aren't going to win it. So it's going to be tough.
Agreed. Well, stay tuned, folks. We'll find out who the Player of the Year is, maybe when you do as well. But whoever it is certainly going to be deserving. But rest assured that there are a number of folks that are deserving of this award. Well, let's take a look at the Coach of the Year candidates, and honestly, we've got a little bit of the same situation here. A number of folks that are probably deserving of the award, and the decision has not yet been made. Nathan, I think that you can make a case for Coach Serbe from James Monroe, 3 state championship appearances, the only area team that's in the state championships this past season. What else do you need to know about him?
Yeah, I think you just made the argument. I mean, how can you go against a guy who's led his team to 3 straight state title games? And I think he'll even admit that the last 2 years, I don't know how much they expected going into the season to be that far. And I think this year was kind of a stepping stone year for them, and it just really is a testament to what he and his staff have done with those kids this year to get them into that point where they are believing every week that they can win these games in the playoffs. And that's a hard thing to do. You're dealing with high school kids to get them to believe after they had a subpar regular season, to get them to believe that they're capable of winning these playoff games. That's a big deal, and he did a heck of a job this year.
Yeah, he really did, no doubt. Well, how about Bill Brown?
Yeah, that's where my personal vote is with Bill Brown this year. I mean, Survey actually had a very good run through the playoffs, but from the start of the year, Bill Brown and his Colonial Forge team, they had to be in playoff mode from week one. Mm-hmm. With that schedule they had, starting out with teams like Highland Springs and Hermitage, and getting some landmark wins that this area probably has never seen when you talk about beating Highland Springs or Hermitage, a C.D. Hilton, and also Ocean Lakes.
Ocean Lakes.
Yeah, those are some really powerhouse type of wins to build a program on.
Yeah, no doubt. But let's muddy the water just a little bit more. So we've got Joe Mangano and Eric Ludden, 2 5A schools that probably need to be in this discussion as well. I mean, it's hard to ignore what they've been able to do.
Absolutely, and in the case of Eric Ludden, and we've talked about it all year, that's kind of been our theme and our stories about Massaponax from day one to now, is they've been dealing with. It just seemed like every week they dealt with a new injury to a big-time player, and the biggest was to Vinny Mahota, a kid who committed a long time ago to Virginia Tech. We all knew he was a bona fide star on defense and offensive line, and this year he gets injured, and it was one of the first games of the year, and he was out the whole year, and they managed to reel off. They went undefeated in the regular season, and to see what they did with all those injuries. Not just Mahota, but they lost a lot of guys, was really impressive.
Mangano, good season for them as well. North Stafford making the state semifinals yet again.
Yes, and they started out with the freshman quarterback, and they got off to a fantastic start with the freshman. Then just when you think he has it rolling, he wasn't afraid to make a big change there and go to Jalen Surratt there in the playoffs, and it almost worked for him as they nearly got over the hump and got back to that state championship
They
game.
did pull off the big victory over Briarwoods, ending their long streak.
Yes,
so
they did.
Some sort of landmark wins in there for North Stafford as well.
Exactly, and they were able to knock Massaponax off, hand them their first loss of the season.
Right. So. That's right.
I'll tell you what impressed me about all these guys too, is that from day one they've tinkered, they've really earned their jobs. I mean, with Mangano, he starts the year running a spread with a freshman quarterback. He tells me one week there's no way I can get Von Purvis more than 20 carries. The next week he's going 40 for 249 against Briarwoods. All these coaches have had to kind of change, their philosophies and what they're doing during the season. And I think all these guys, Bill Brown went to a dual quarterback system late in the season that worked to perfection. And how many times can you see a dual quarterback system actually work? And he made it work. And then with Ludden, every week he had to throw a new guy into the lineup. And then Survey, just kind of dealing with a young group of kids and like getting them to believe. Right. I just thought they all really just worked really hard, and they're all very deserving, just like those players that we mentioned.
It's an outstanding group of gentlemen. Certainly some folks that the community should be very proud of. Working with these young people and teaching them some great lessons and getting them to really perform at the highest level that they can. That's really a skill. It's a talent.
Yeah, and even with those 4 coaches mentioned, we can't neglect to leave out J.C. Hall at Cortland and also Greg Hatfield at Eastern View. Both of those two coaches did outstanding jobs this year.
Yeah. Well, as with the Player of the Year, we will find out who the Coacher of the Year is when the Freelance Star is able to announce that. We'll have to just wait and see. Let's take a look now at the all-area team. Okay, well, I'm very pleased to be able to announce the all-area first-team offense. And we'll start off with the quarterback from James Monroe, Jay Scroggins. Kind of hard to go away from this young man, a junior only.
Yes, he had a fantastic season, threw for over 2,400 yards or so, and helped lead his team to a state championship. And he was pretty much the primary weapon in that offense. I don't want to say the only weapon, but he was the primary weapon, and he used his receivers quite well.
Sure, made that offense go. Sort of an interesting offensive lineup here. We've got a utility player, Damon Daniel, who was a big impact on offense. He had some defensive roles as well, but pretty good offensive quarterback there.
Yeah, he was. He's a gritty runner, but they had another quarterback, Gary Jennings, who also did some running there for him. But he's a good passer, a good runner. He dealt with some injuries this year. He had a quad bruise that he had to kind of deal with. And he also they kind of tinkered with him at linebacker a little bit to get some more recruiting film out there of him. So he was kind of mixing and matching a little bit, dealing with some injuries. But he had a really good season there at quarterback for them.
3 running backs on the all-area first team, and it starts with Vaughn Purvis, the outstanding running back from North Stafford. We spoke about him in the Player of the Year considerations. He certainly is very much in the running for that. I'm not sure there's a whole lot more that you can say about him that he didn't say on the stat sheet.
Yeah, that's right. Over 2,000 yards rushing and 30 touchdowns. There's not much more you can say than that.
Anton Jenkins from Cortland, also making the first team at running back. Part of that 3-headed running attack there at Cortland, but Jenkins gets the nod at running back.
Yeah, he was kind of the perfect running back for that offense, that wing T offense, and I think he had a shade more numbers than the other 2 guys, but he was kind of their short yardage scoring guy, and was really big part of that offense that churned out yards this year at Cortland.
Sure. And finally at running back, Kendrick Kuby from Eastern View. Kind of a surprise team there. But an outstanding season, at least statistically. They made a nice deep run into the playoffs as well. So Kuby with the nod at first team running back. Moving on to wide receiver from Caroline, Keyshawn Johnson. We also have Quentin Gray from Mountain View and Jarmal Bevels from James Monroe. Pretty good group of wide receivers there, huh, guys?
Yeah, outstanding group. Keyshawn had over 1,200 yards receiving and 12 touchdowns. I believe Gray came in just under 1,000 yards, and Bevels, with that run to the state championship, he was a 1,000-yard guy as well.
And Gray and Bevels both collected interceptions, too, at defensive back. They both played on both sides of the ball and did some really good things there at defensive back.
Moving on to the offensive linemen, these are the big uglies that get the running game going, and certainly some impressive offensive performances from these rushing performances from these teams. Representing North Stafford, we have Tom Vukovic from Massaponax, Greg Brown, Mason Madeline from Mountain View, Dewey Decatur from Cortland, and Grant Garza from Colonial Forge. Wow, and it's, those are some impressive running offenses there. And obviously, you've got to have the blocking up front to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie, and I think all those guys were huge parts of their rushing and pass protection plans there. So,
the special teams, we have kick returner Gordon Collins from Mountain View. He ran, I don't know how many he had, but a number of big returns and several touchdowns there. Big part of the special teams play for Mountain View. And finally, the place kicker, David Ditt from James Monroe. He kicked his 18th field goal of the season, actually, this past Saturday. Sets a record for the area, only 2 short of the record for the state of Virginia. So David Ditt gets the nod at place kicker. Moving on to the first team all-area defense, we will start with the defensive line. Jaywan Horton, one of the most disruptive defensive players in the area this past season. Would you agree?
Yeah, you notice him when you watch them play. I mean, I think most offensive coaches will agree that he's a hard one to game plan for. And
his play has certainly gained some attention at the next level. I guess we're not quite sure where he's going to go just yet, but he's certainly getting some attention.
Yes, he orally committed to Central Connecticut State back in August, but they've had a coaching change, and also his interest has picked up because he's had an outstanding season, and he garnered an offer from Toledo. So it remains to be seen where he might end up.
Well, talk about a player who's had an outstanding season and increased his value at the collegiate level. Steven Sobchak, defensive lineman from Massaponax, also plays interior line on the offensive side. It looks like he's going to be going to Virginia Tech and playing with Bud Foster and the Hokies.
Yeah, and Virginia Tech had a gray shirt offer on the table over the summer, and he committed to JMU because he wanted to enroll in the fall. And I think after seeing him this year, Virginia Tech's like, I think we'll take you in the fall too. He's had a great season, and obviously that shows by the offer there from Virginia Tech.
Yeah. So Tech's going to have Sobchak and Mahota.
Yep.
Of course, Mahota doesn't show up in this, but we know that he's a stud on that defensive line as well.
He's out for most of the year, so but they'll be able to play with each other again at the college level. So
yeah. Also representing the defensive line, we have Antonio Wynn Coleman from James Monroe. He had some really important plays, particularly on special teams, some kick blocks there that really won games for them.
Yeah, he did that against Essex and against Heritage as well. And he's a player we've known about since he was probably a mighty mite back in elementary school. He's been on the scene for a long time, and he's just a sophomore.
Just a sophomore.
Yeah, they call him Big Baby, and he's playing like a grown man now. So.
And he gets first team all defensive honors at defensive line. At the linebackers position, we have Gus Little from Massaponax, Corey Henderson from King George, Nakia Thomas from North Stafford, and Andrew Jean Charles from Colonial Forge. Good crew there.
Yeah, Little's going to be one of our guys next year. He's going to be getting a lot of the offers, the college attention. I think he's already moving up the list, the recruiting list for next year. Henderson going to Buffalo. He's a Division I caliber guy. Also played quarterback for King George. Nakia Thomas is one of the key players for that great North Stafford defense. Gene Charles played most of the year on the defensive line, but a great linebacker too. So really, really strong unit there at linebacker.
Moving on, let's take a look at the defensive backs for the first team all-area defense. Starting with King George senior Jordy Estes. We've got him at 30 interceptions for his career.
Wow.
My goodness.
Yeah.
My goodness. Not a whole lot more that you can say about that. That's just that's one of those numbers that probably is going to stand. I guess it's not something that we keep official track of, but hard to believe that that's going to be beaten any time in the near future at least.
Yeah.
Also at defensive back from Cortland, we've got Kyle Talley and Daniel Izagu. We certainly have mentioned his name several times from Colonial Forge. And finally, Mountain View defensive back Dante Branch.
Yeah, it's quite a group there, and the thing you would notice, especially about the top three guys, Estes, Talley, and Izagu, is that they not only made plays, but when they made them, they had the ability to take them to the house. Whether it was a fumble recovery or an interception. And Dante Branch also made some really big plays in big games for Mountain View. So quite a group of ball hawks there.
Opportune, turning defense into offense there. Certainly the trademark of some good defensive backs. Getting some love, first team all defense at utility player AJ Forbes from Massaponax. Great all-around player there. So congratulations to AJ. At punter, we have North Stafford's Joey Sly, just outstanding all-around player. I mean, we talked about him earlier. If you were to start a team somehow, I think he'd be one of the first ones that you'd want on your team because he's going to be on the field literally the entire game and playing an important role in it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then finally, at punt returner from Massaponax, Tony Barnett, another returner just like Collins, who brought it back to the house on several occasions. A big threat for that Massaponax Panthers team.
Yeah, he was one of many really versatile guys on that Massaponax team who did, like Forbes and like Latney and like all those guys. They could go out there, they could make a play in special teams. Barnett was also a receiver who made. I think you'll remember the Riverbend game. He made a couple really big plays there in the receiving game.
Absolutely.
And they were loaded with athletes, and he was just one of many great athletes that they had.
So some great athletes that we have just named as well. So congratulations to the entire all-area Fredericksburg Freelance Star first team. Congratulations to them. Well, folks, that'll do it for this season of the Gridiron Report. It's been a lot of fun. I want to thank Nathan, who was our first guest back in the day when we were doing Skype and just testing this out. But
seems so long ago.
Yeah, how we have advanced the memories. But thanks so much for your participation and time with this. Also, thanks to Taft, who was our second guest and also toyed around with some of the Skype that we did. And I think we can say that we've grown, and it's been pretty fun. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've had a blast. I
Good.
appreciate the invite. So.
Sure. Well, great news, folks. I'd like to, I'm very happy to announce that we are partnering with Fredericksburg.com and FLSvarsity.com. We will be continuing in all sports Fredericksburg area shows starting in January. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to working with the great folks here from the Freelance Star and FLS Varsity specifically. So we will be focusing on the top stories in Fredericksburg area high school sports starting in January. So please look for that. Certainly more information to be coming out. For the Riverbend Sports Network and the Gridiron Report, I'm Mark Coleman. Thanks for watching, everyone.